Coming up next.
I was out in the parking lot, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm very raw and real. And I thought I was in a good, well, I thought I was okay. And then all of a sudden it just comes out and I started cussing God out. And I cussed him out for the next 10 minutes solid, ranting, raving, saying things that I hadn't said in years, saying things I didn't know I even knew. And I just couldn't stop. And I was just doing it because I knew when I was done, he was going to strike me dead with lightning. And I knew I was being so angry at him. I deserved it. And I'm just going to rant my rant until he strikes me dead. So at the end of the 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm just waiting, and when I got done, the Lord quietly said, "Are you done yet?" I went,
No.
the hell? Pissed me off. Are you kidding? That's your response? I'm waiting for you to strike me dead. Am I done yet? So for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I did another rant.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You're here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction, your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation, and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Welcome back to the Faith Over Addiction podcast. I have with me Tom Snow, and he is going to talk about his journey, 40 years in the wilderness. He's going to talk about identity. We may get into a little spiritual warfare as well, because we know this podcast is about helping women reclaim their identity in the middle of chaos of a family member's addiction. So, Tom, tell us about these new books. These just came out in the last 6 months. There's a great story there.
Yeah, well, I started the first book over 40 years ago. I met the Lord 55 years ago in the beginning of the charismatic move and walked through a lot of spiritual warfare, learned a lot of things about, my spiritual father and I, we walked through many things. We saw the same miracles that we read about in the New Testament with Jesus and taking care, working with the enemy and not, and learning that it's nothing to be scared of. We need to, if we're walking in Christ, in his power, Jesus said he gave us all power over all of the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And we have too much Hollywood thinking that, it's The Exorcist and it's, people twisting their heads and all the demonic things. And, the devil's real and possession's real, but that's such a minor part. But Jesus, when he dealt with it, you never saw him cower and be afraid. When the demons possessed people would come up, he would say, shh, because they'd be going, "You're the Christ, you're the God, Son of the living God. You're here to kill us." And he'd go, shh. He said, "I don't need your acknowledgement." And then he'd say, "Go." And we think deliverance is this pray for hours and, call the demons, give me your name. And I was that dumb in the beginning of the charismatic move. I played the same game to find out that's just not how God does it. And when he does it, it's real. His power is real. And the enemy, as powerful as he is nothing compared to the power of God. And so when we have Christ in us, the hope of glory, we were sealed on the day we asked him into our lives with with the promised Spirit of God, which it says is the fullness of the Spirit. So the first book, after going through many years of learning of this whole thing on spiritual warfare, I felt like I was supposed to write this. So I wrote it all down. And because I called it the Daily Stand, because it was part of my daily prayer life. You
Mm.
know, I don't get down on my knees and clasp my hands and spend an hour praying every morning. I don't do that. I believe we're to walk with the true and living God. He lives in us. He wants to flow through us. We are to live a life, and our life's to be a life of prayer. It says, pray unceasingly. How can you do
Mm.
that? You have to take care of the kids. You got to
Yeah.
cart them around. For you ladies, you have husbands. For me, I have a wife. We have work, we have activities. How can you do that? Well, because by the Spirit of God, we can commune with Him and we can have the groanings that come through us. We can be praying and it's in the middle of watching a dumb TV show. It just doesn't matter. It's if the Spirit of God is in us, we can just agree with Him what He wants in the moment. So, spiritual warfare, as I said, I went through a bunch of things. We saw the miracle power of God. I was healed as a teenager of terminal cancer, a
Oh,
tumor the size of a football in me. I will not take the time to tell you that whole story. It's in the whole beginning, it's in the first chapter of the book.
awesome.
Um, and there's a lot of dynamics and a lot of terrible feelings went with it. There was guilt because my mother died the year before from cancer. I was a 14-year-old playing with asbestos dust to create an invention to protect people from it. But in playing with it, she got cancer. I felt the guilt of the world.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And so anyone who understands guilt, and then when I found out I had the tumor in me, I had a rock hard tumor the month after my mother passed. I felt it. It was about the size of a walnut. I wouldn't tell anybody because I felt like I deserved to die. I had just killed the love. Only love in my family was the mother that showed it, right? In the
Right.
1960s, the father and the two brothers don't show love. So
Right.
my mother was the only source, and the guilt was overwhelming. Long story, won't tell you all of the details. It's in the first chapter. But in the end, when the Lord, when I asked the Lord in, when I began to walk with him, once I knew he was there, I was no longer afraid of dying of cancer because I already knew I was dying. That was
Mm.
just a given. It was not a big deal. And I know some people go, that just sounds stupid. But when you have the presence of the true and living God, when you sense his love about us so much, there's no more fear about dying. Dying was a given.
Mm-hmm.
I'd lived with it for a year and a half. It was a given. It's just, I'm doomed to be 6 foot under. But I went from fear to it's no big deal. I'm going to go home and see Papa. You know, to live is for Christ, to die is, or, to die is to gain, to live is for Christ, right? So
Yes.
it's yeah, hey, if I'm going home, I'm going home. And I know that sounds very flippant, but listen, when you've suffered for a year and a half, and then you know the true and living God, and you're no longer afraid of dying, then it just changes your whole psyche. And the whole thing of changing our psyche is really I think you're about, is learning to let the power of God in us because we have to overcome a lot of stuff, a lot of abuses, a lot of hurts. In that time, I was hurt by my father because he thought I didn't know about the cancer, and I knew long before he did.
Mm-hmm.
And he took out a multi-million dollar policy, life insurance policy on me.
Mm.
Hear that. In today's economy, it'd be worth multi-millions. Back in 1970, it's a different dollar, but today it'd be worth multi-millions. And it's like, my father didn't hate me, but he had just lost his wife, my mother, and maybe he was reeling. And I thought, well, if you take out a policy enough to bury me, and buy a case of beer and drown your sorrow, that's one thing. But when you're going to cash in and retire on me, no. So my anger, wrath, hate grew inside of me. I had so much unforgiveness. So for anybody who knows hate, unforgiveness, people who've wronged you, there are people who've been wrong worse than me. I was never sexually abused, and I only empathize with people who have gone through such hurt. But my hurt was deep for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a father that I thought at least loved me surfacely that was going to cash in on me. So the long story won't go into all those details unless you dare ask, because I'm a storyteller. But those are all in the book, in the first book. So the Lord did heal me, and He did it miraculously, and it wasn't running up to the altar to go get prayed for. I was riding home on a motorcycle, talking to the Lord, His still small voice we can hear.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was riding home from back in that day, we used to have in the charismatic move meetings 6 days a week, twice on Sunday. That was our joke, but it was more truth than fiction. The
Right.
power of God was moving so much. We could be together for hours worshiping, and you'd think it's minutes. And all the things that you read in Corinthians, we saw all that move and all that power. And so we couldn't get enough. And so part of, daily life was just talking to Papa God. So I was riding home one night on my motorcycle, and the Lord and I were just chit-chatting, still small voice, and He goes, "Hey, do you see in Isaiah where I said, 'By His stripes you are healed'?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Do you see in First Peter where I said, 'By His wounds you were healed'?" I went, "Yeah." Look at the verbiage, are and were. Are is current to the future, were is past. He
Mm-hmm.
says, Isaiah was looking to the cross. Peter's looking back to the cross. He
Yeah.
said, I finished everything at the cross. Everything. He says, would you like that healing? Now I'm getting ready to go home and be with Papa God. I'm watching healings all the time. I even prayed for people and watched them get healed. And I didn't care that I did
Right.
wasn't. I just didn't
Right.
care anymore. It was just, he's too great, to live with the true and living God. So I was like, yeah, whatever, nonchalant, whatever, sure. But in that moment that I said that, I felt a change. And
Oh.
within 24 hours, the tumor, hard as a rock, the size of a football, melted, dissipated, and was gone out of my abdomen.
Woohoo! I want to go back to Tom, something that you keep saying over and over again, Papa God, the love with God. A lot of the women that I talk to are in chaos. And like you, they're very angry. And where is God? And how, I thought I made good choices. I thought I'm doing the right thing. You're still showing up at prayer meetings and having this heartfelt experience with God. How did you develop that relationship?
Well, let me tell you a funny story that probably a lot of people can relate to. And I'm just not going to be religious. By the way, I hate religiosity. I hate fake spirituality. But at the time, I wasn't broken when I'm going to tell you this story because I've gone through 40 years of the wilderness. Now, I hope nobody ever has to do that.
Yeah.
But maybe because when you see the power of God move so strongly and you go, God, I'll never take credit for that. But somehow inside we have ego and we think, oh, but I didn't do it. It wasn't me. But did you notice that God did it through me? You
Yeah.
know, we have ego.
Yeah.
It's just terrible. Maybe it's just me. I got the ego, you know. And so I was going, and I had to go through a period where all hell broke loose, right? Now I'm saved, I'm healed, I gave my life to the Lord. I want to go serve the Lord. I was like, okay, I'll go be evangelist. I'll go do this. I'll do whatever you want. And God says, no, go to college. And I went,
Hmm.
you're not listening to me, Papa, because I'm willing to do anything you want. I'll travel the world. And he goes, go to college. I said, you're not listening. That's what my father wants me to do. My father's an engineer. He wants me to be an engineer. Well, I love math and science, and that's where Papa God wanted me. And there's reasons for that. Some of that's in the book where I can explain in the chapter about God can do anything. The atomic structure actually proves in the atom that God not only created the world in 6 days, but holds everything together by the word of his mouth. That's a teaser. You'll have to read the first book to find out why science proves that God is real. Well, first of all, if God made everything, he also made science. There's people who worship science get way off base. So I'm not talking about that. But the simple atom tells us the truth, which isn't everything. So back up, I was now saved. I would gone through college. I'm an engineer. I'm married. I have 4 children, and life is hell. It's
Wait,
not all this
wait, I
fun
want to back up to the argument. So you're saying, I will go anywhere. I want to serve you. I want to do this. God says, go to college. You say, and that's not on my agenda. He says, go to college. What made you listen?
because at the end of the day, no matter how much we argue, I want God's will, not mine, right?
How did you come to that point? Because so you're standing in your kitchen, you've been caring for your kids, husband has spent the paycheck or whatever is going on, and you're like, God, this is not the agenda, and I'm
Right.
not sure I trust you anymore. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
deep trust that I hear from you over and over. How did you gain that trust?
Well, it was gained by walking with the true and living God, right? And we all have that. It says we were sealed on the day on when we asked the Lord into our life, we were sealed on that day with the promised Holy Spirit. And it says the fullness of the God is in the Spirit. So the fullness is in us. Well, our spirit, we didn't realize the day before we asked the Lord into our life, we were dead,
Mm-hmm.
right? We didn't know we were dead to the spiritual realm. The day after we asked the Lord in, get past the frilly feeling of I just got saved, we don't know that he's there because it's deep in our spirit. We don't feel from our spirit. And so our spirit's deeper than our soul. And in our soul is where we feel the heart, the mind, we think, we feel, right? And so, but Jesus said, John 7, that from our innermost being, from the depth of our being, would come flow rivers of living water that would flow out and just, would be the amazing flow. And as he said, it was the Spirit of God. So
Mm.
it's deep within us. So the whole thing to learn here is, and I'm certainly no perfect person, is that if we learn to yield ourselves, to get out of the way, to let God have his way, and if we understood the spiritual realm, we've only been given two powers in the spiritual realm. We think, and those two powers are choice and yielding. We can choose to let the Lord, we can yield to him. And we think, well, no, but isn't there power in prayer? Isn't there power in praise and worship? Isn't there power in fasting? Isn't there power even in spiritual warfare you talk about? The answer is no. You go, what are you talking about, Tom? Well, because those are things. And when we position ourselves right with the Father, then those things, prayer has power. But it didn't have power by itself. It's because we yielded and let the Spirit of God come through.
And we're willing. So God says we can know his will, which always baffles me because I have a hard time with that. It says we can know his will, but in that argument, you yielded, you were able to listen enough and yield to his will, even though it was not your will. What kept you? I'm raising young men right now. You're a young man, you're on a motorcycle, you're obviously doing your own thing. What kept you from having the power struggle and saying, no?
Well, I'm sure I've had my no times. During my 40 years in the wilderness, you remember and I'm going to have to get back to a few things, but we'll circumvent and tangent back.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember the movie Gone with the Wind?
Uh-huh.
And during my 40 years in the wilderness, a lot of time my favorite word was to the Lord was, frankly, Scarlet, I don't give a damn.
Yeah. So you have this powerful moment. You do go to college. I'm going to fast forward you back up to where you were. You do go to college. You're married, got kids. What's blowing apart there? You did what you were asked to do.
Right. And you think, God, I'm living for you. I'm yielding to you. I'm wanting to live for you. I see your power and your miracles. I see all these things. I'm being raised into leadership, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
my part. And in the body, and that's all. And I'm just seeing, first of all, a lot of church abuse from leadership, things that, we will maybe get into today. My second book gets into that. I'm seeing my marriage going to hell. I mean, I'm sorry, my wife was this is my first marriage, by the way. I'm on a second marriage. The first marriage, she was a believer, spirit-filled, should have been a great match. And on the surface, it all looked good. But even her spiritual parents warned me before I got married, saying, "Do you really want to be with her? Do you understand the depth of her emotional hurt and needs?" And I'm kind of like oblivious, you wear the blinders, like, oh, I'm in love. And God can do anything. I've seen him do all these miracles. So why can't he fix this person? So I'm going to go in, blinders on, and just believe. Well, I had fit or 26 years of what I would call, she was and God forgive me because I'm going to have to correct myself in a minute, but I used to call her the Queen of Bees. She had PMS 24/7, 365 for 26 years. And it was worse on the time of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And just the nagging, the fighting. I don't like to fight. She would throw things at me. If I went to the couch and said, I'm just not going to fight, she'd take a 32-ounce glass of ice and drink and dump it over my head to get me up to fight. She would hit me, throw things at me. I wanted to start Abused Husbands Anonymous. And,
It's true. I mean, it's not just women, and we know that more and more. Sexual
right.
assault, all those things. It's not, and it happens. And men, unfortunately, feel like they have the compulsion to stay silent. And often in the more fundamentalist, charismatic movements, that is. There's one author who talks about that she's helping women get set free, but a husband comes up and he said, they would rather I die a bloody death than fall off my white horse in my night suit and say, I can't do this anymore.
Well, let me tell you how I fell off because I was trying to hold it all together. So here you've got this wonderful thing. I see the power of God. I get healed. I see miracles all the time and, happening all around charismatic move.
No
And it,
peace, though. No peace.
well, no, I have peace when I yield to him, but then the world is in turmoil, right? My marriage is in turmoil. My kids, uh, one of my kids gets a very serious disease that the Lord healed, but doesn't mean it didn't have to go through a couple years of problems. I watched
Mm-hmm.
my father die in that time. I watched, work. I'm working 80 to 100-hour weeks
Mm,
all the time because my wife was, um, I need more. I need more.
mm, mm,
I
mm,
want more.
mhm.
Um, and I actually was glad to not be home because of all the horrid way I was treated, you know. And so the only thing I missed was being with my kids, but I would make sure I did certain things with them to give them
Sure,
dates and do things to make
sure.
life better for them. So all this crap was happening, all this hell was breaking loose and, around me. And it brought me to a pinnacle. And one night, maybe a few people can relate to this, but I used to work from 9 in the morning till 2 at night. And I was walking out 2 a.m. into the parking lot, uh, Bell Labs, and there were still cars around. And I don't know if they had cameras on me that night. If they did, they saw the craziest thing because I was walking out there talking to Papa God, but no longer in the same happy mood, right? It wasn't
Mm.
a happy matter of fact, when I go through times and they're really bad, I just call him Father or Lord. I don't really go Papa right?
Yeah.
Papa is Abba fathers. That's, where it comes from. So in that moment, it wasn't necessarily Papa. It was more like, okay, Lord, whatever you want to do.
I
Sure,
will
whatever.
yield, but it'll take everything I've got to yield.
Right, right. So, okay, whatever. And all this hell is happening. And I mean, it was stressing me. Church relationships, family relationships, abuse in the church, all these things happening. Me growing in leadership positions, watching this even more, hurting me to watch the believers being hurt,
Hmm.
which I cover a lot in my second book. So, as I was walking out there, and I was talking to the Lord, and I just said, just having a normal conversation, still small, quiet voice. We can all hear him. Now we all see in part, hear in part, know in part. So anybody who thinks anybody hears all the time and hears perfect, I don't. Nobody does, at least according to the Bible. And I
Hmm.
trust that more than anybody who claims fake spirituality. And so as I was walking out in the parking lot, and I was trying to have this nice conversation, and then I just like, I couldn't do it anymore. And
Hmm.
I got so angry. And out of nowhere, I began to cuss God out. Papa
Ooh.
God, who loved me, he healed me, he saved
Right.
me.
Right.
He showed me the greatest love ever. Actually, read the first chapter. You'll see that one time in my life, I heard the audible voice of God before I was saved and his love that surrounded me. And it was like it's what he did to draw me in. And I'm like, and now he's saved me, he's healed me, and all these wonderful things except my life's hell.
Hmm.
You name anything around me, and I can't name one good thing. Maybe if I went fishing, that was it. And even my wife would nag the hell out of me if I went fishing because I was taking time away from her, blah, blah, blah. And so, anyhow, I was out in the parking lot, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I'm very raw and real. And I thought I was in a good, well, I thought I was okay. And then all of a sudden it just comes out and I started cussing God out. And I cussed him out for the next 10 minutes solid, ranting, raving, saying things that I hadn't said in years, saying things I didn't know I even knew. And I just couldn't stop. And I was just doing it because I knew when I was done, he was going to strike me dead with lightning. And I knew I was being so angry at him. I deserved it. And I'm just going to rant my rant until he strikes me dead. For the next 10 or 15 minutes, I just ranted nonstop. I mean, I'm yelling. If they had cameras, they got to say, there's this crazy guy. He's talking to the
Yeah.
wind, waving his arms. You know, we got a Looney Tune.
And they didn't come out, running out, get an ambulance, strap you
They,
in.
they didn't.
Nor did you get struck dead, so your contract with God failed.
Well, here's what happens. So at the end of the 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm just waiting, and when I got done, the Lord quietly said, are you done yet? I went,
No.
the hell? Pissed me off. Are you
Mhm.
kidding? That's your response? I'm waiting for you to strike me dead. Am I done yet? So for the next 10 or 15 minutes, I did another rant and a nonstop. And I did it until I couldn't say another daggone word if you tried. Then it was like, I'm done. Now I'm done. Strike me dead. I know I deserve it. And I just stood there waiting. I'm ready. Let's go.
Right.
And
Right.
it'll be a relief compared to the hell I'm going through. So, you know, and I'm waiting. And the Lord didn't. And
Right.
instead, He surrounded me with His love. I felt the great love of God that surpasses understanding, the peace of God that surpasses understanding, Philippians 4:7. And I felt that love and it was overwhelming. And I started crying and I said, why? Why don't you kill me? I just treated you worse than I've ever treated anyone ever in my life. I just ranted and raved. Why in the hell don't you kill me now? He said, because I love you. I went,
Mhm.
no, it doesn't make sense. I just told you all these horrid things. Why? And he says, I just, he says, I already knew what was in your heart. I just
Mhm.
wanted you to find out.
Oh, oh, that's that heart where there's hate on one side, love on the other, and we all have it. It's who we choose to feed. He just wanted you to see it. Oh my gosh, Tom, what happened from there?
My whole life changed. I lost the all religiosity, all fake spirituality. I no longer thought of myself as anything other than, a Christian, someone who loves the Lord. I
Hmm.
wasn't caring for position and leadership and, notoriety. I didn't care if I wasn't traveling and around in ministry, and I didn't care about any of that. I didn't care because I now knew I was back to the true and living God, and I didn't have to put on fake stuff.
Hmm.
We want to be fake. We don't want to show this, you know, we don't want to let people see our ugly, the
Right.
good, the bad, and the ugly. We don't people
Right.
see the bad and the ugly. Well, guess what? Let them see it, you know? Um, as I told you before we started, I said my spiritual father used to say, this is the mistreatment of how we are as Christians. But he used to say the Christian army is the only army that shoots their wounded.
Ow. Okay, so this is a great segue into how oftentimes when women or families reach out for help with addiction, they can be very hurt by the church. What have you seen and what can people do to step away from that? I'm assuming you're still part of some type of an organized group because we're called to be in a group, but I may be assuming the wrong thing.
I basically am part of a home group,
Uh-huh.
a very small home group. I got spoiled by the charismatic move, and it's hard to be in big groups. I was in big groups for a long time, part of ministry, watching things. Um, And part of this deals with church abuse. And when, I don't know if we want to segue back to that. So your segue right now is to say, how are
If
we?
how so things are going on in the home like yours. It's chaotic. They've reached out to the church and they're not getting a response.
And that's because we have a lot of people who aren't real and honest, right? Because most churches have been taught to live in this fake spirituality. And my second book goes in and teaches about false belief systems and Stockholm syndrome. And in the church, in churches, religions, denominations, and I'm not saying all churches are bad or believers are bad, but there's plenty of churches, denominations, religions that there are power structures, right? And we in the Western world think that, you've got the leaders at the top and the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, Ephesians 4. Then you have the elders. Then you have the deacons down on the bottom, our little peons, us down here doing the whatever. And that's the way the structure. And if we want to grow in the church, we have to act good here so we can eventually move our way up. Because if we want to serve the Lord, you have to act that way. And so we've been taught all these false beliefs, and it's a Stockholm syndrome that you have to do this. If you can sense by the Spirit of God inside of you, if we listen, that something's off, there's a check in the spirit. A lot of times we can see that in our own churches, we can see that, in groups, and we get that check in the spirit, but but we see the power of God, the gifts of God. We see leaders that are preaching the gospel. So we go, well, it must be us. We must be wrong. And then you have all these Stockholm syndrome folks who've been around for a while who are the ambassadors for these leaders going, hey, you know, if you were right with God, you wouldn't be going through all this trouble. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, if they look at any of the prophets, that's just absolutely backwards. And it certainly wasn't your experience. So, as you had this loving epiphany that I have said everything I can think to say, and you still love me, what changed for you with the movement in the church, with choosing to be in a religious group? How did you shift?
Well, I think, we all have to learn. And the key is we have to learn the Word of God, right? We have to study and show ourselves approved. Um, I know some people go, well, you have to have this version of the Bible. Some people are stuck on King James Version. Other people are like this version. I read a bunch of different versions. I love that we have software nowadays. I can have 5 different versions up at once. And I click in and read the original text behind it, the Greek and the Hebrew, because I like to study in depth, okay?
Right.
And I don't just take people at their word. You tell me this is what this scripture means. I was on a podcast the other day with an atheist, and he was the host, and that's quite a trip to be
Uh-huh.
there and listen to him trying to pick out certain scriptures and tell you why God's not real and why if he was, he's awful and blah blah blah. And I'd say, well, hold on, and I'd click over here on the Hebrew. I'd pull that up and compare because I'd go, well, do you understand? You don't have the full view. Well, anyway, so studying, learning. The other thing that makes us different, the thing that is key to our walk, is Philippians 4:7, which is the peace of God that passes understanding will guard our hearts and our minds.
Mm.
And we have to learn to walk in the peace. Now, if we learn to yield to the Lord in the worst of times, going through hell, going through all that worst crap, I mean, anybody can walk through easy times. You don't learn in the easy times.
No, and you still often don't attribute it to God. It's, oh, I did the work for that, or oh, that was an easy break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has to be that walk with the true and living God. Well, his truth is simple. It's just not easy. The truth is, the fullness of the Godhead is in us. Is it easy that we walk with the Lord? No, we have to make choices every day in the middle of every day through all the hell of family, work, friends, life, church, and people who in church actually have become the Stockholm inductees in reinforcing what the structures told them. And they're there going, well, you must be wrong. There's something wrong with you. And
Right.
so we then feel worse, right? Well,
Which is not what God intended.
not at all. Not at all. He called good leaders to be overseers and caretakers. He called good leaders, it says in Ephesians 4, even when he gives the fivefold ministry, the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, he says he gave that to build up the body, to equip the saints to do the work of service. And it is until, and no one likes to read that word, until. It's an until ministry. And I'm going to throw people for a loop because I talk about Egypt in the church in my second book. And the pyramid structure that Western Christianity created was the power structure at the top, the apostle,
Mhm.
prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, then the elders, then the deacons, and then us little peons at the bottom, the sheep, the saints. And we're all down here, and can we ever be good enough to walk up those steps? Well, oh my God, you have sin in your life. Oh, you have good, bad, and ugly. Oh my God. Well, guess what? They do too. They just hide theirs. I guarantee it. And
Well,
so,
I mean, we all do. We're all saved and we're all sinners. We're all righteous and we are all put in disobedience so that he can save us all. I think that's a hard paradox, but it's the same paradox as Jesus being human and being fully God, fully human and fully God at the same time. So when families are walking through some of the crisis that you had, some of the things that you're going on, what were you, I mean, you had this anger prayer, but what were you praying? What released you from the 40 years in the wilderness?
well, it wasn't anything that I did. I just, Papa God, and during the wilderness time, again, sometimes it wasn't Papa because it was just the struggle, but I never walked away from him. It just was difficult. There was all kinds of difficulties in the marriage and in the family and in the churches. And yeah, as I said, I was in positions of leadership, except God was showing me that whole picture was backwards. That
Hmm.
instead of a pyramid, the truth is an upside down pyramid.
Oh, it's the servant leadership. That's what Jesus did.
Didn't
He said,
Jesus?
"You cannot have part of me unless I wash your feet."
That's right.
Period.
And he said, and along with what you just said, is he says, you want to be served. He says, I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. He says, the least amongst you must be the greatest, and the greatest amongst you must be the least. oh my God, the power structure aren't going to love that because he's saying the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. And then you have the elders who are be the overseers and the protectors, not the, did you hear what the leader said? And I'm going to condemn you because you actually let your uglies out. Oh my God, we should let our uglies out. But oh, we can't
Yes.
do that. How do you praise the Lord and let your ugly out? I do it all the time. I screw up and I mess up and I go, "Hey Pop, I screwed up again." He goes, "Yeah, I know." I said, "I'm
I'm
sorry."
right here with you.
He goes, "Cool." Like, and you go, and we used to say, "Oh, I'll never do it again." That's that promise. No, I don't say that because that's just baloney. Sanctification's a lifelong process. I will be being sanctified. I'll have my uglies and my bad as long as I'm on this earth. So I
Yes.
began to see the truth was the power structure is at the bottom, and then you have the elders, then you have the deacons, and guess who gets to be at the top of the God's pyramid? It's the little old peons, the saints.
Absolutely. So did you have to leave? I'm assuming you had to leave the structure.
Oh, I was forced out twice because I was called a heretic and speaking heresy. The funny thing is, these were under two different churches with apostles who were at the top in their structure. And I'm learning before the Lord how this whole structure thing is wrong, right? Like that's
Hmm.
part of this 40 years is learning. You've been yielding and you've been wanting to raise up into leadership and you've been totally wrong. I've
Hmm.
been totally bamboozled. And I would travel around the state with one of the apostles and minister with him and all this. We were in great condition. We could talk about anything. For years, we were in great position. But I used to talk to him then about what I'm learning from the Lord, that this power structure is wrong.
Hmm.
And he didn't like what I said, but he didn't. But it was between us in his office, closed door. It was no problem. We could talk about anything. And so, but then one time in the middle of the congregation, some people stood up and asked the same questions because he was basically, they had a plurality of leadership and he wanted to boot one of them off because the guy wasn't spiritual enough. He wanted to grow the church into mega churches, which is baloney sandwich. And I have a 12-year-old daughter in the other room. And so in my world, BS is baloney sandwich.
There you go. I love it.
So
Love it.
anybody knows what BS stands for? Well, it's baloney sandwich. So
Absolutely.
anyway, we were, it's like behind closed doors, we could talk. We would go out and minister together. We would travel the state. And, but someone in the church, a group stood up and, well, especially when they were going to boot off one of the five pastors because he wasn't powerful enough in gifts and they wanted to grow a mega church. So they're just going to boot him. And he was the nicest. He was the truest pastor. He would be the one who would comfort you. You could be honest. You could tell him the uglies and he'd put his arm around you and he'd be the one to lift you up.
Yeah.
So they want to
Yeah.
boot him off. And so the congregation was like, stood up and they said, we don't agree with you talking to the apostle who they were supposed to all be an equal level, but the apostle knew he was above. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
everybody knew they're all five were equal except the apostle was higher, right? And it's all the bologna sandwich you can eat. And so some of the congregation stood up on that Sunday when he was going to boot the pastor out and, you know, let him do other things. It wasn't kicking him out the church. He just was demoting him, right?
Hmm.
And everybody knew this guy is the true love pastor. Every the other ones are a little too egotistical. And Jim was the most egotistical. Never tell you last name. I won't tell you all the details, but his names just happen to be Jim. It's in my second book. I give first names. And so they're asking Jim, Jim's up there giving this announcement, and they're like, we don't agree, but and they went over and they looked at me because they knew I was out ministering with Jim all the time. They said, Tom, and I was teaching prophetic ministry there, and they were in the prophetic groups, and they said, Tom, what do you think? Well, here's the thing. Behind closed doors, is one thing, but I'm not going to lie for Jim. So I stood up and I told the truth about power structures and how we had it inverted, how we had it wrong. At which point, Jim took the next few Sundays to call me a heretic, to say I was preaching heresy,
Mm.
to force me out the door, which I left because I'm not going to stay where I'm not wanted.
Shake the dust off
But
your feet.
dust your feet. But here's the thing. If you ever challenge these kind of misguided leaders who love power, and don't fool yourself for a second, some of these leaders love power. They're on a power trip.
Mm.
They're at the top. They think it's this way. They're on a power trip. God called them, and they're the minister, and you listen, and there's control, and there's coercion, and there's all these wrong things. And they've trained their Stockholm people in the church to be their little mini me's, to go out and to keep everybody else in line. Because when somebody screws up, you get a whole group going, "Oh, brother, sister, oh, something must be wrong with you. Let us pray with you. We'll help you pray through." No, you can't be honest that you're hurting. You can't be honest that you're real before God, and we've learned to pretend because that's what we've been told. It's our fake spirituality.
So you just described what's probably happening in the home. There's a control, there's an ego, there's something happening in the home, but that's born out of a weak, hurting ego, typically, is why the control is happening. And then there's this sense of, I can't tell you the truth because then you'll say that it's wrong with me, some gaslighting going on in there. So it's no wonder that if you're coming from that home, you've probably been attracted to that kind of a church. That kind of a church does the same thing. And what else do you do but throw up your hands and say, this is the way the world works?
Hmm.
But you told us from the beginning. Recap for us. This is what I really want listeners to hear, and tell us where we can find you in your book. The love that God really has for you, because that's what you came off with in the
Hmm.
beginning.
Well, and that's the whole thing. He is the God of love. Now, we can see he dealt with people pretty harshly in the Old Testament, and that's a difficult thing for some people to assimilate, but he is a God of types, and he was setting types, and he had to deal with some nations pretty strict. Jesus came and died that we can have the fullness of God in us, that we can live with the true and living God. And so I guess I'm fortunate that I was dying of cancer. I was fortunate that I went through hell in that. I was fortunate I had a year and a half of pain, of fearing death and having a rock hard tumor the size of a football in me. I guess I'm just lucky. And in one way I am, because God's grace was there.
Mm-hmm.
I would wish that on no one to have to suffer, right? But it gave me the start to know the true and loving God. And that love is worth so much. Better than the love of the best mate is to know the love of the Father, Papa God,
Mm-hmm.
and to get the chance to walk with Him every day. So my prayers are not, "Oh, I have to pray again. Oh my God, get on my
Mm-mm.
knees. Oh, because the church said if you do it for a half hour, you're okay. If you're doing an hour, you're really cool. You're really good." It's like, I don't get on my knees. I drive down the road. I walk around here. I cook a meal for my daughter for lunch. I do whatever. Because it's a relationship. So a
Yeah.
relationship with the true and loving God. Now, have I ever had a rough moment with that? You heard me. I yelled all hell against him because I
Uh-huh.
had to rant and rave because he wanted to show me what the ugly was inside of me, and he still loved me. He
Yes.
didn't care about my ugly. I
Yes.
didn't have to put
Yes.
on, and it actually set me free because I didn't have to be religious anymore. I didn't have to be fake spiritual anymore. I could tell everybody my uglies, and I don't care. You don't like it? That's okay. It don't
Well,
bother
and he
me.
already knew. That's where I have to keep coming back is when anything happens, this is not a surprise to God.
Right.
It's not. We
It's
may
not.
be totally taken off guard, but it's never a surprise to him.
It's not. Can I tell you a funny story?
Please.
I have all through my first book, I tell lots of lot of stories of the power of God and some funny stories. My second book doesn't have as many funny stories because it's a pretty serious topic about church abuse and setting the captives free in the church. But let's go back to the funny one. So in the first book, and I love to talk to Papa God. So this was before I got married, probably, or maybe early when I first got married. And I was combing my hair, and I used to have long, nice curly hair. Now I don't have too much hair. when I was actually in the 70s. Had hair halfway down my back. I was, first of all, a hippie, then I was a biker gang, and then I became a Jesus freak. So, you know,
Did the
went through
whole
my
round there.
went through my high school, and they're like, we don't know what to make of this guy. So, but here I used to have really long, beautiful hair, and I'm really vain. And I still comb my hair, but I don't have as much to comb anymore. And I used to comb it all the time, and I would just, be primping and looking in the mirror. Nobody else but me. Nobody cares about their hair and wants to primp. Talking to about every woman out there and probably half the men. But
Right.
so I'm there primping, and as I'm combing, and I comb it, and then I take the hair and I throw it in the trash can. And I comb it again, because I had so much hair, come out. And the Lord said, "What you doing?" I went, "Well, I'm combing my hair." And then I take the hair and I throw it in the trash can. So I go back to combing and primping, because I do it for a long time. And he goes, second time, "What you doing?" I went, "Okay, well, let's see. I'm combing my hair and I'm pulling the hairs out and I'm throwing the trash can." Comb it again. He says, "What you doing?" Now I'm getting frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you know what I'm doing. What? Why you? I said, "I'm combing my hair. I take the hair. I'm getting sarcastic, and I throw it in the trash." I said, "Why? What do you think I'm doing?" He says, "Well, did you know that you just threw away hair number 9,558,
Ooh.
hair number 20,251, hair number 960, and hair 8,012? Did you know?" And I stopped dead in my tracks.
Uh-huh.
I was flabbergasted, because the God of the universe, who holds everything together by the word of his mouth, when he says he has every hair on our head numbered, that a sparrow doesn't fall unless he agrees, he knows that intimate,
Mm-hmm.
every hair. He's like, "Do you know what you're doing?" "No, I'm just throwing them away." He's got them
And
numbered. He knows every number.
absolutely. That is a priceless story. Priceless story. Tom, tell the audience where they can find more about you, your book titles. Where can they find all that stuff?
Okay. My website is justtobeclear.com, and
Okay.
it's a number two. So it's just number two, beclear.com. Hopefully you'll have that in your
I'll
notes
have all
below.
that in the tags below. Yep.
And you can go there, you can read a little bit about the first two books. The first one, The Daily Stand, and it's called, the subtitle's A Spiritual Warfare Instruction Manual for Today and the Upcoming Great Move of God. And like
Mm-hmm.
I said, that book is more about learning to walk with Papa God and getting our heart right, learning how to get free of the guilt, learning how to get free from unforgiveness, learning how to bless and curse not. And I guarantee you, we are cursers. We don't know it. Even in the church, we are. We don't even know how to pray right in the church. And we pray, "God, get them, beat them up, blah, blah, blah." And we are channels yielded to either to the Lord or the enemy. Jesus said, "If you're not with me, you're against me." There's no middle ground.
Mm.
Okay. And so we need to learn how to walk right with the Lord. Then we learn to walk in his authority, where we have
Mm-hmm.
all power over all the enemy. So, wonderful book. It's preface before you read the next one, Set the Captives Free. I refer a lot back to that book on the second one. And that Set the Captives Free is for us in the church, and how to be set free from power structures and how to be set free from false belief systems, and the Stockholm syndrome around us and how it gets there, and how the indoctrination happens. And anybody who's lived long enough, as a Christian, you don't have to be that long. You will be able to
You'll have
relate
run
to it.
into it, right?
So both
You'll
books are
have run
talked
into
about
it.
there. And then from there, you can click out to the Amazon links. You can buy them on Amazon, and I hope it has value to anyone's life.
Tom, thank you so much for being here today. You've really shed some light on, hey, the uglies are okay. And the deep, deep love of God, even when the chaos is happening. It's not a surprise to him. So, Tom, I
Correct.
really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.